Salutation shades, and welcome back to your one-stop shop for all things strange and unusual, talking with shadows. The conversation everyone has, but no one wants to admit to. Here with your host, Vic Waitley.
And a very excited Marcus D. And I want to give a quick shout out to my good buddy Adam, the one who supplied us with one of our extra mics, and as well as a good guy that I talk to a lot in our business networking group that I'm a part of. So big shout out to you, good buddy. It was funny, the other day he was texting me because he recently started listening to the podcast, and he asked me, hey, have you guys ever done Cicada 3301? And I was like, you know, it's the same reason as to why we really don't get into Anonymous. We're scared of it's like if you say anything.
I mean, that's not incorrect.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I absolutely love paranormal stuff involving the digital world, like in the digital age. And Cicada 3301 is definitely one of those, that cool hacker group that did like this cool challenge that they had for people that they had.
Well, they're a think tank, not a hacker group.
Well, sorry, an electronic a think tank. They put out this cool like digital challenge for people, and yeah, I just
we've talked about them twice now, right?
Yeah. We've never done a full episode because again, like I said, I don't want to say anything mean, and then you know, hack us and take the channel. Like, you know, pretty sure that we've got a man in black probably watching us somewhere, watching the channel. I don't want to add them to the mix too, but
big that's viewership, man. That's
I
viewership.
know that's viewership. Did we ever say, I can't remember, what was the name that we gave to the man in black that we Greg, I think it was
Steve, maybe? I don't know.
It was, if anybody can remember, put it down. Big shout out to him too, by the way. Hope you're doing well. Thank you all for supporting the channel and helping to fund to fund his incomes. Good. Shout out to Greg's family. So today, Vic got us a classic. He got us an oldie. He got us some Cider Boys.
Oh, I love Cider Boys.
To drink today, so I'm super excited. This channel was built on Cider Boys and hard ciders for some of our first steps. So,
oh yeah, we've been drinking these for a while, and I actually really like Cider Boys. Some people say they're too sweet.
I like Cider Boys,
but like I kind of think they're just right. For some reason, I'm struggling with the cap.
You were struggling with a twisty.
It was on like extra tight or something. Just an update for you guys on how the studio is going. We now have outlets on all the walls, where before we only had a handful of outlets. We've started getting into some of the decorations going. It's looking pretty good. I'll probably put a picture on the Discord. Things are going nice and slow. It's
the studio is no longer looking like we are shooting Saw 7. like we're in the productions of that. So it's going along pretty good. So, and tomorrow we're hoping to go and get some new mics ordered as well, so that way we can get some people here into the studio as well.
Yeah, we're waiting to get Ricky Bruckman back. I was talking to him a few days ago over some Indian food, and he was talking about when to come back on. I'm like, I'd love to have you back on, man.
So cool. So, you know, it's so interesting. If you're a huge fan of the paranormal, you always know that weird fear sometimes of talking with some people about like the paranormal, making them think you're weird. Like sometimes, like we all have this. It was so funny. I was driving to the Comedy Caravan yesterday because I was the host for the weekend, and I was riding with this new guy here from Evansville who's in the scene that was gonna open after me. And he's a mailman. He works for the post office here in Evansville. And we're like probing each other for how much we like of the paranormal. And then he's like, oh yeah, I've seen tons of stuff down there, you know, down in Dogtown and weird floating yellow eyes.
Wait. Dogtown, you say?
I know. Yeah, he said that he had to go down there, that he had to cover that mail route a lot while he was down there. So I was telling him all about some of the paranormal stuff that's down there in that part of town. And he was like, he didn't even know, but he's like, that explains a lot as to why it's so creepy down there. And he was telling me this cool story about floating yellow eyes. So I'm hoping we can get him into the studio to get some of the stories that he's seen. Because I imagine that mail carriers that have to ride out in some of them like rural parts of communities probably see some really weird paranormal stuff.
Sounds like we've got some cool interviews coming, which we've been a little dry on interviews lately.
I know. Well, again, it's the studio kind of looking like,
yeah,
a death trap. But it's looking much nicer.
And also, like, with the upgrades we're doing, it sucks now, but by the end, it's going to be so much better.
Well, it's also, like, less embarrassing to invite people over because now we actually have, like, professional mics, and we're not all, like, four of us huddled around, like, one Yeti mic that we're
my goodness. Also, guys, you don't know how small our old studio was. It was tight. Yeah, it was like 3 people could not easily get in there. Whenever we had guests, we had to record elsewhere.
And we're some big people. we're some big people. We're not short. Okay, so there's a lot of podcaster that's got to fit into that room. So this is much better for us. So super excited. And thank you guys for tuning in today. We've got a really, really cool episode.
Oh, wait, comments.
Yeah, we're going over the comments from our last episode where we did the Corfu Island monster, which was really, really, really cool story from the early 2000s about a guy that spotted this like marine-esque animal, got a photo of it, and it went viral on Twitter.
I personally think legitimately the most underrated cryptid sighting of the modern age.
Absolutely. Definitely go check out that episode. We appreciate it so much. Comments for that episode. Barbara Continalo, patron, thank you so much. Super supporter, my family back there. Said, I would like to ask why you guys did not bring up temperature of the ocean now. How many degrees warmer is it in Corfu now? I tried to research it. No one is talking. She sounds so much like me when I post on stuff. I know where I get this now. I literally comment the same exact way. Perhaps as the Earth warms, the deeper creatures are trying to adapt. This may be the first of many creatures being seen. The Hook Island one looks to me like a basking shark wrapped in a tarp from a cargo ship. Just my thoughts.
I could potentially see that. Mm-hmm. The reason why we didn't get into that particular thing is, well, not going to lie, I had so much to talk about as far as the Corfu Island monster that, like, I just didn't think we could fit in with the other stuff. But that's a really good catch and makes so much sense.
Absolutely. I mean, changing water temperatures has definitely affected a lot of marine life and some of their habitats. I want to say that there was something to do with great white shark migrations because of changing ocean temperatures. And one of the things that it was saying, I swear I was watching something on Animal Planet the other day about that. And that could be something that we could be seeing. We could be seeing changing water temperatures, and that's what's bringing them up from the depths. And that's why we may be running into we may be seeing some more of these later. So,
well, we probably wouldn't see rising water temperatures bring them up from deeper areas. We'd see them migrating from southern to northern areas.
We from one location to another location. Interesting. Are you saying that we might see the Corfu Island monster off the coast of America now? I
mean, it's not impossible, but I would be a little surprised because there's kind of a whole Atlantic Ocean. Like, maybe they're also, here, but, like, we just haven't gotten sightings of them yet. I don't know.
Okay. The next comment, which I want to bring up, I can't give the person credit because it's written in an Asian language, so I can't even attempt to pronounce it because it's written in Asian characters. But the person said, I really do not want to be an asshole here, guys, but it's clearly a boat bumper.
It is not clearly a boat bumper.
Hang on. The discrepancies are outweighed by the similarities. It's probably warp bent due to water refraction.
Okay. Everyone first, thank you for commenting.
Yeah, thank you for commenting.
But I'm also going to straight disagree with you. It would have to be warped in a really extreme way, and it would have to be warped in ways that don't really make much sense. Also, if it's old enough in there where it's getting warped, it's also getting battered by salt water as well as sunlight, where it should be seeing cracking at that point instead of like just bending and reshaping. Also, like, for it to bend in just that such a way, I think it's unlikely, but I will give you this much. You have the more popular opinion than me because so much of the world is very convinced that it's a boat bumper. I just do not buy it.
Now, I have, they did post, you can go to the comments, and they did post a image for the side-by-side comparison. And I've seen this image before. The question that I have about the boat bumper is every time that I've seen one of these comparisons, the boat bumper is always white, and the Corfu Island creature is gray. Like, every single time. You think that if it was just easily like a boat bumper, that people would be doing a side-by-side comparison of a gray boat bumper, which you really don't see that color of boat bumper anyway.
I've seen them in a lot of different colors, And they do come in a lot of other shapes, but none of them really, like, the one that you always see is the one that looks the most like the Corfu Island creature.
Well, they're usually white. They're usually white.
Yeah.
For that, like, just for color. And so to me, I have a hard time just believing that it's a boat bumper. And also, too, if you look at the Corfu Island, like, if you look at that photo where they're stacked up, like the one that you were providing, look at the neck. Look at the neck. It is clearly bent in, and those are fat folds on the Corfu Island mountain creature. Like, that is something that I bring up as compared to the boat bumper, which are these, like, long linear things that are in there, and you can just see that it's bending like a head's moving, not like something like on a boat bumper, which just has grooves.
But I will tell you, you do have most of the internet's consensus. I am the outlier on this one.
How dare you call us that? No, we appreciate it so much.
Yeah, no, I actually do
Anytime.
like the argument.
We will always, we do not filter out our comments, and we will bring them all up. Now, Laughing Fox brought up an interesting comment, and I did not have an answer for this because I really wanted to get to this, but I want to get your thoughts on this, Vic. While you guys are out there, please look into this thing about leaving a can of beans for the Mothman. I don't know if this is a meme or something, but I cannot find an explanation anywhere. But as one who fancies themselves as a cryptozoologist and a memeologist, which I love that phrase, I cannot abide this gap in my knowledge.
I've not heard of this. Is this like cookies for Santa?
Why would the Mothman want beans?
I don't know. I don't really like beans.
Are they Bush's baked beans?
I kind of like lentils, but I'm not sure if those are actually beans.
Like, I want you to look this up right now. Roll that beautiful bean footage. Like, I'm curious as to, maybe it's a luck thing. I think aren't lentils supposed to be lucky? Is that a thing?
I not that I know.
This is my guess pre-looking into this. This is pre-looking into this, and this is my guess going in. Y'all tell me if I'm wrong. I swear there is something to do with lentils and luck. And the Mothman typically brings bad luck and misfortune, like any winged cryptid humanoid. That is my guess. That's my guess.
My guess is that it's just a weird meme, but we'll look into it. We'll look into it.
But I mean, I think I'm right, but we will look into it. All right. That's all the comments that we're gonna do for today. Thank you guys so much. As always, comment, and we go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. So okay. So for today's episode, I wanted to give this in this last episode, but I really wanted to give this much more breath to talk about this. Our theme for this month is underwater paranormal phenomenon, and I love playing with the theme of the month. And I was researching something, and then I stumbled upon the story, and I really thought that it was going to be interesting. The Stroudsburg Rain Man. It's underwater.
You are really stretching underwater.
It is. When it rains, you are under the water. Rains come from the sky, sir.
I'm true. But okay, you got me. I'm interested. I'm curious about this one.
It counts.
Okay, it counts. Everyone just smile and nod and accept this is what we're talking about today.
Like, I was like one of those kids that was in school that would just do just technicalities.
And here's your gold star.
Yeah, it would be like teacher would write put your answer here, and I would just write your answer, being like, that's what you said. It counts. Like, I'm that kind of kid.
Oh my God, you were such a little shit.
I am a little shit. That's what I tell people. I'll win on a technicality. I don't care. So the Strasbourg Rain Man was a case that I was familiar with, and but we don't talk a whole lot about demonic possession stories on the channel. And I really wanted to bring this up, especially since it was on theme. So this takes place in late February, around like February 24th, like late 20s, over the course of 3 days in 1983. And this is really, really popular. If you listen to this, if you're 30 plus, ask your parents. They probably remember this story on Unsolved Mysteries because it was one of the more popular things back in the day. So this story centers around a guy named Don Decker. He's the person involved in the story. And Don was apparently, I love how this in the story, he was in jail for receiving stolen property. And every single time I've ever seen this, they always sort of like try to downplay the fact that he was a criminal. It's like, he was in jail for like a minor infraction. We're just saying, we're just going to gloss over this. But he was in jail. We're going to say it. And his grandfather, his grandfather, James Kishaw, had passed away. And so apparently, and I didn't even realize this was a thing, They let him out of the county jail to go to the funeral. Is this still a thing?
Yeah, I believe this is still a thing.
Yeah, like he gets a furlough from jail to go out.
You have to be a non-violent offender, but
Yeah.
I believe this is a thing.
Yeah. So he was serving a pretty good lengthy 4 to 10 month sentence for stealing goods, but he gets out because his grandfather passed away. And he goes to the funeral. Now, one of the things that people did not talk about, that didn't know about Don Decker and his grandfather, was apparently that his grandfather had been really, really abusive to him. And he goes to, and this really wasn't talked about for the family. So if you've ever been to a funeral, typically it's they're typically,
you're showing the person's life in the best light you can.
Yeah, it's a celebration of life. That's why they call it that. And if you're not a huge fan of this person, or if they've done really mean things to you, it just kind of ticks you off. So Don got upset by all of this. So instead of going back with his parents, he decided to stay the night with his friends Bob and Gene Kiefer. Kiefer. And so one of the things that happened in the very first night that he was there was that while he was there with Bob and Gene, he starts getting upset and he goes into this bizarre trance-like state just out of nowhere, because most adult men in the 1980s in Pennsylvania and America go into deep trances. And while he's in this trance, water starts dripping from the ceiling. And it's just out of nowhere. And it freaks them out as to the water coming out. One of the weird things about the water is you would think, well, maybe there was a leak. But one of the things they describe about the direction of the water was that it was going horizontally across the walls. Yeah. A detail that so many people leave out of this story when they try to debunk it. Just saying. So the water starts going across that way, and some water's dripping down too, but there's a lot of water that's literally just going sideways. So the Kiefers freak out.
I mean, if it's raining sideways, yes, that is the appropriate reaction.
They're on the set of an effed up Purple Rain music video or something, like Prince's Purple Rain video, and they decide, because they think that something may have gone wrong, they call their landlord.
It's raining sideways in my house. Call the landlord.
Yeah. So I love that they call their landlord, because they have what I call renter's confidence. Renter's confidence is something like if you're renting a property and something breaks, what do? You call that SOB landlord up, be like, come fix this right now. When you own a home, you realize you're that SOB and you just let shit go. So they call the landlord.
Okay, wait, before we get into the landlord.
Sure.
I've got a quick question. Is there any more detail on this trance state he enters that seems to predicate this encounter?
He goes into it a little later. He has some other instances that with the trance state, but they don't give a whole bunch of details other than eyes rolling in the back of his head, becoming unresponsive. I've never heard anything else other than this trance-like state that he goes into. And
are there any details on what they were doing right before he entered the trance-like state?
I don't think that I saw anything of what they particularly were doing. I think that they were probably just decompressing. So I know that they hadn't eaten, because this is the next part of the story, is they eventually leave the house to actually go eat.
But please continue. Sorry, this is a really interesting story.
Okay. So what happens is they call the landlord, comes over, and he's trying to, and again, he's trying to investigate whether or not there's some sort of a leak, and he can't find any evidence of this. Okay. He can't find any evidence of this. They can't see any evidence of plumbing problems or anything.
So by the time the landlord gets here, had the phenomena stopped?
No.
Okay.
So he goes there. So the next thing that happens after the landlord is what the landlord chooses to do. He calls his wife, and he calls the cops to show up to the house, because he thinks, because he's got to protect his investment. Maybe he was called as a concerned citizen. So he calls the cops, and so they call the cops, and the cops get there, and when the cops show up, the cops are the ones, they also witness the water moving horizontally across the walls. That goes so much. It goes from one room to another room like in that sort of route. Like it's not like it's just going across a wall then just stops and falls. No, it's moving around a corner to another area, like it's going across like that much.
Okay, so it's engaging in impossible movement.
Yeah,
at this
like
point.
weird behavior. And so they eventually, like, the cops leave. And so I think to just de-stress, the next thing that happens is Don and the Kiefers, they leave and they go across the street to this like pizzeria place that's across the street. And after they leave, the landlord stays. When Don leaves, the rain stops. Yeah. So the phenomenon actually ends whenever they actually end up leaving. Now, they go across the street and they go across to the pizzeria, which is owned by a lady named Pam Scrofano. And she had came over and she had seen the rain too while this was going on, and invited them over there. And this is kind of when the whole idea of possibly some sort of demonic possession starts coming out. Okay.
Got a question.
Sure.
At what point does he come out of his trance?
He comes out of his trance when the cops get there. By the time the cops get there, because if you watch like interviews with the cops, or if you watch them talking, they're interacting with Don.
Okay. So
he goes in this trance, but he doesn't stay in it forever. And so they're at the pizzeria. Don and the lady and the cops have left. They went back to the station, and Don and the Kiefers are there, and Ron's still at the house trying to see if there's some sort of the landlord's there trying to see if there's some sort of plumbing problem. So while they're at the restaurant, Pam, the restaurant owner, decides that she is going to get this is a demonic possession. While she is accusing him of this, it starts raining at the pizzeria. And they start seeing water coming down from the ceiling there. Yeah. And obviously now Pam, the restaurant owner, is freaking out. And she runs over and grabs a crucifix and runs it over and puts it in Don's hands. And it starts to burn Don. And he's complaining that it's burning and starts burning his flesh while she puts the crucifix in his hand.
Okay.
Yeah. And so this is when Pam, the restaurant owner and friends of the Kiefer, says, okay, they are absolutely convinced it's some sort of demonic phenomenon, like you have to get an exorcism performed on somebody. And so Don and the Kiefers leave the restaurant. And when they leave the restaurant, the rain stops at the restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that we have two examples so far, I think I'm starting to potentially see a pattern. And I'm going to throw this out to see. I want to see if this remains consistent. It seems like it may be stress-induced. Because, I mean, in the first situation, he's probably sitting there seething. And then in the second one, it's right after an accusation. So I'm now wondering if that's going to be a trend we see.
Speaking of trends induced by stress, Don and the Kiefers return back home, where the landlord and his wife, Romaine, are trying to figure out if there's some sort of a plumbing problem. Now, Ron's freaked out. Landlord's freaked out. Landlord's wife is like, I'm calling bunk. I'm done. This is all something. You caused this. And she just starts laying into Don. And while she starts laying into Don, all of a sudden from the kitchen, they start hearing pots and pans start rattling and shaking and making noise. And everybody's like, what is this? And right after this happens, Don starts levitating off the ground and gets hurled backwards.
Like, how far?
Pretty far into a wall. Yeah. It's a big day. That's just that's day one.
Okay. So he comes in, he starts getting accused. There's some strange movement at a distance, and then he lifts up and is just boomed into a wall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this guy's having a hell of a day.
Yeah. So at the end of day one, the cops went back and they talked to the chief, and the chief, huge skeptic, he's calling bunk. And he comes back to the cops, and although, for the record, there's no actual police report from the time that they go out. Now, keep in mind, remember, this is the 1980s, so documentation necessarily isn't that great. But this is still
also like probably the cops were worried about writing this report.
Yeah. Who's going to write that stuff down? All right. So, but the chief can't let this go. So now we moved on to day 2. So on day 2, the chief tells the cops they got to go back to the house to try to figure out what's going on at the house. And at this point, because again, we're in rural Pennsylvania, what they decide to do is their own weird experiment, and they try to put a cross in Don's hand. So when they put it in Don's hand, it doesn't have that it's burning, it just starts getting really, really hot. And when he hands it back to the cop complained that it was warm in his hands too, like it heats up, like it heated up. Okay. And then again, right in front of the cops, the rain appears again, and then Don levitates off the ground again and is hurled back in front of the cops.
Okay. I'm starting to form another theory.
Yeah.
I've been thinking for a while, this kind of sounds like PK.
And before you get into that...
Okay, sorry.
Last detail before day 3. When he gets thrown back, at this point they notice that he's got 3 claw marks on his neck, and he's got blood dripping from his neck. Yeah. And that's day 2.
Okay. One of my thoughts that I've been kind of teasing around with is this kind of sounds like PK. It sounds like some form of psychic phenomena, potentially.
Oh, yeah.
In that sort of way that, possession cases are often lumped in with potential psychic phenomena and things like that. But there are like some outliers here. Okay. The pots and pans rattling, the levitating, that sounds somewhat consistent. Like PK summoning rain. Well, we have talked about weather phenomena with it, but I don't know if I can justify sideways rain in this case.
Is this the part we want to like? I can talk a little bit about some of the skeptical arguments that people try to make about the rain for what caused it.
Oh, I would love to hear some of this.
We can put one of these in now. Okay, so one of the most common explanations that people cite for the rain phenomenon, like at the pizzeria, and eventually a little bit later back, because I'll get to a little bit more what happens at the jail with him in his house, is a concept called ice damming. So again, remember this is February, right? It's kind of so it's cold outside. So ice damming is a phenomenon in which ice is on a roof, it melts, kind of like a glacier, slides down, refreezes. So water's flowing down, and then that causes it to get inside the roof and get inside the house, to then cause rain dripping from the ceiling. And that might explain what was causing the rain to come down in the house and in the pizzeria.
That's
now I'm gonna say
a weird coincidence with timing.
Yeah, the whole idea, the whole thing of like also it going sideways. I don't know if water really goes sideways along a wall. It's kind of weird.
I mean, okay, if we play super charitable, like super steel man that argument,
right.
I guess we could say the intermittent rainfall was oddly coincidental as far as the timing. And probably the times where he's thrown backwards were both situations where he would be on effectively a slick floor and could possibly be like him falling.
Yeah, but
you can't make any sort of justification to the burning from the cross. That's one of those things where no matter how much we steelman the argument, it doesn't justify that part.
Well, for one, here's my critique of this particular argument that I've never heard anybody say about the whole ice damming thing, was that, again, the landlord was there. I have a hard time believing that a landlord of a rental property is not familiar with the concept of ice damming in Pennsylvania. Like these sorts of things happening. Like, you understand the risks typically. So I'm going to give the landlord the benefit of the doubt that they would understand that concept, and he just couldn't give an explanation for causing that. And truthfully, it never comes out later, because if this is ice damming, that causes damage. That's not going to go away. And it never comes out later that they discovered that the Kiefers had damage from water, like from their roof. That would have came out later. The whole thing with the cross burning thing, I'm a huge fan of, I know Vic's not, of spontaneous human combustion. And I've always been fascinated with those particular stories.
I don't hate them.
I mean,
just
well,
not the most interesting of the paranormal
hang
to
on.
me.
When you start looking at some like Eastern explanations of it, it's because there's this concept of like a chi imbalance, and this might start causing people to. You can get such an imbalance that you can actually start heating up, and that can cause combustion. But there's whole practices like within Buddhist meditation called tumo that allows you to raise your body's temperature.
Tumo's insanely fascinating.
That's what I'm saying.
If you guys haven't looked into it, it's really interesting.
So if you look at that, like you have the ability of learning how to do that. Now, if a person goes into a deep like trance,
and you do begin tumo with meditation.
That's what I'm saying. Like I think that it's possible for a person possibly to accidentally stumble upon a phenomenon like that. Like I'm not saying it'd be common, but I think that it's possible that something like that could happen. Now that's a pretty far stretch. I'm just trying to introduce a different theory as to that. That's really what I'm doing with this.
If you're really interesting.
I mean, if you're trying to go that far, with trying to give some kind of an explanation as to what could be causing him to be heating up. Because again,
here's one potential issue though. Tumo requires a lot of training. Like you don't generally spontaneously utilize tumo. It's something where through a practice of meditation, you're actively causing your body to heat up.
Right. But also, I think that if you believed that you genuinely were demonically possessed, that I think that this might cause like an intense amount of trauma with somebody that they might.
I mean, we can manifest the weirdest things with our body. That is true that we can cause the weirdest stuff to manifest within us.
Yeah. I have a hard time believing when you look at some of these really intense possession stories that they didn't see some issues ahead of time, that there weren't some concerns before that, like some precursors. Like you don't go from 0 to 100. Like in most cases, like the exorcism of Latoya, like that's another episode that we did.
Yeah,
there was tons of other phenomenon that was going on prior to the incidences of them ending up at the hospital or the cops showing up. So there was some telltale signs way before that. So thinking about that in like with somebody like Don Decker that's had a trauma in his past for a very long time and seems to be a troubled guy, I would believe that he's probably had some phenomenon going on before that maybe he just denied away in his head. That's my guess.
I mean, quite possible. I think guy was making some bad decisions.
Right. So, then we're going to day 3.
Yes.
So day 3 comes around. And so this is when him and the Kiefers are trying to call around because they're like, oh crap, they believe that there was a demonic possession going on. And so they start calling around trying to get pastors to come over and preachers to come over to do an exorcism. Well, if you've ever, like most possession cases, they got turned down by a ton of people.
By this point, you said this was in what, 1982?
83.
83. By this point, I believe there have been several famous possession cases go poorly where like the person who was possessed ended up being harmed through the process of the exorcism.
Yeah. So, but they do find somebody that's willing to come over. Now, it's not a Catholic priest. This is just, I'm assuming some sort of like from Protestantism that comes over to do an exorcism. And this person begins praying over, I believe it's a woman. Don't hold me to that on particularly, but I believe that it was a woman. She comes over and she begins praying for Don. And while she's praying for Don, he begins to convulse violently and like reported like terrible feelings, ominous feelings. And then the rain starts up again. But by the end of the prayer one time, the rain stops. And he stops having problems. And then all the manifestations into the house. They don't have any more phenomena in the house. Now, after this, lady goes home. Don, we go back to the beginning of the story, has to go back to jail.
Yep.
So he's got to go pay the piper for that. And so now he's at the jail. And while he's in the jail, the rain starts happening in his jail cell. So much so that it causes his cellmate to get drenched in rain. Witnessed by guards, janitors, tons of people freaking out the other prisoners during this incident.
Okay, during these in these follow-up events that occur, are people still reporting seeing the rain go sideways, or was that just a staple of the first report?
First report.
Okay.
First report. There's no instance that I've ever seen of it going sideways when it goes to the jail. But there's other incidences at the jail that are a little weird. So, the lieutenant warden at the time starts getting involved. And at this point, Don starts feeling like he can control. This is a weird detail, too. Don starts feeling like he can control the rain now.
Okay.
Like he's been, like, which is really weird for possession stories, by the way, now. This is one of those weird little details that people often overlook, that because it's not like in most possession stories people are like that they can do this at will. Like Don starts believing he can control summoning the rain. So one of the guards puts a challenge to Don and says, "Oh yeah, make it rain in the warden's office." And then he does. Don starts concentrating, and the next thing that happens, Don starts like water stains just start appearing on the like on the front of the warden's shirt. Yeah, and
wait, did it rain or did like water stains just appear on?
They
him?
just appeared on his shirt.
Okay.
Yeah. So now the jail's freaked out. So now the jail decides that they're going to call a reverend in to talk to Don. So a reverend goes in, and this is interesting. So the reverend goes in and starts praying for Don, and has some sort of, this is like a scene from, like the scene from The Exorcist, where like he goes in by himself. There's this stench of death that comes from the jail cell that's reported by the guards and the reverend. He begins praying for Don, and when he's done with the ceremony, the rain just stops, and it never happens again.
Okay, so that's like the conclusive end to the strange phenomena.
Yes, and that is the story of Don Decker.
Okay. One of the first things I want to talk about here is
I love that at the very beginning of this, Vic was like, "Do you think that this whole thing is going to take up a good part of the episode?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." Told you.
Okay. Although rare, I have heard of hydrokinesis. Basically the ability to control water, control rain, things like that. The most common application that I see is somewhat among energy workers who do the thing where it's like, I'm going to focus on this bowl of water and the water is going to spin. Truthfully, most of it has shaky camera work that makes me think like there's some like shady stuff going on with it, but it's not like hydrokinesis is totally unheard of. Although I couldn't really justify it. I mean, I know there's always water molecules in the air that one can utilize. And another possibility is, if it's not for the last case, I would actually almost guess that this could still be a form of odd pyrokinesis. Mm-hmm. With, like, we are talking about there's snowfall in the area. One of the times when I was working at the hospital, the ceiling just erupted with water because it had stored up so much snow up there, and then it got warm enough, causing the water to flood in and overwhelm the normal drainage. So if it could still be a form of pyrokinesis, being just very uncontrolled, where he's heating up the area around him and causing a water flood, although does not justify coming in sideways.
Or water just mysteriously appearing on the warden's shirt.
Well, my thought was like maybe sweat, but then the warden would be talking about him feeling extremely hot.
Well, another thing too that it might have been that if you, like maybe the warden fell asleep in his office, the water just dripped from the ceiling, and he's like, and he doesn't want to admit he fell asleep. He goes, no, it was mysterious. It was a demonic possession. That's what causes.
Or they barged in to see if it was raining in the warden's office. The warden is like, males lactate sometimes and often feel a certain degree of shame about that. Maybe he's a lactating male. That does happen.
I could imagine a man in the 80s. I can imagine a male now not wanting to be like proud of being like, yes, I lactate. Like that's. I think we'll be like, no, we're just gonna go with demonic possession.
They barge in without him knowing, because ahead of time he would have changed his shirt, and they barge in without him realizing they're coming in. And he has like the little drippies on his shirt, and they're like, "Oh goodness, it worked." He's like, "Oh my, how did that get there?"
There was ghosts. There was demons. There was demonic possessions.
But I would also say, yeah, we're going into some what I would call highly unlikely territory where we're relying on a series of extremely strange coincidences to line up to justify this. I'm a little torn if I think that this is PK or demonic possession. Because a lot of this we can relate to psychic phenomena in a somewhat tangential way. We also know the mind can manifest wounds if you believe it's strong enough and you have the right psychology.
Like, one of the things that I think that, and this is something that I'm going to make a possible hypothesis, that I think that a lot of times demonic possession occurs around people that have had very, very traumatic events. Mm-hmm. Okay. And a lot of times when people talk about Don Decker and his early interactions with his grandfather, he talked about that he was being physically abused. And this is literally just the beginning of any video that you ever do research on this. Okay. Don Decker is later arrested in 2012 for arson. So he starts playing with fire. Fire starting is actually is pretty common sign in kids that have been sexually abused. So I think maybe there may have been more trauma that Don may not have been letting out at the beginning of this, which I think might also be explaining about why that he was more upset about people trying to celebrate his life.
Yeah,
I don't want to throw that out there, but I'm like, it's just
that would make a lot of sense, because especially sexual abuse is one of the ones that, like, if you do not find a powerful way to cope with those emotions, will manifest in strange ways and cause trouble throughout the course of your life, and usually in insanely toxic ways. Right. But the thing is, like, I can see this apply to both. It could either be he was caught in a very weak point by a maleficent spiritual being who then engaged in a case of possession, or he's someone who was a psychoactive person and then put in a case of incredible stress, causing it to manifest. And in the conclusion of it, it could be the preacher was able to drive it out, or the preacher was able to soothe them enough that it went dormant again. Mm-hmm. Because we don't have all these predicating tales of, like, odd psychoactivity through the course of his life. Right. So it's probably something that really would only raise its head during the most extreme circumstances. Right. I'm also thinking, like, there are several spiritual entities associated with water, rain. And it's not that common in, like, Pennsylvania folklore to what I know of. Like, they have a lot of beliefs in, like, haints and things like that. But, like, I know that there is in Africa, South America, Central America, a lot of beliefs of rain demons and demonic entities that can cause rain. And this isn't the only possession case I've heard associated with strange weather phenomena. It's rare. It's not like something that's reported real often with possession cases, but it is mentioned from time to time. But I think this is probably the most famous one. But what's you do your thoughts on this case first? I'm still composing mine.
I mean, I'm always, anytime that we've ever done a story involving demonic possession, I've always talked that I think that I'm always leery of a one and done exorcism. Mm-hmm. You know, I come up from a very Catholic upbringing, so a lot of what I've seen, like with Catholic exorcisms, they take a very, very long time. You know, and again, you're dealing with entities that have existed for eternity, before time was even a concept. So I'm like, if you're an entity that's that smart, all you have to do is stop. People just think it goes away. You know, and now you're dealing with an individual that just thinks they can control it. How many times have people, like a scary individual that would, imagine the scary individual that would think, maybe I'm demonically possessed, but now I have the ability to control said thing. And I'm like, I have a strong hunch that I don't think that it was successful. Especially when you're looking at some of the later issues that Don Decker eventually fell into.
Like, isn't it a common case when, in Catholic exorcism, when they're trying to drive out demons, where the demon will go dormant for a long period of time in an attempt to, like, get the exorcist to think that they've succeeded? Yeah, that's one of the things.
That's why they take, like, months. I mean, the case that the movie The Exorcism is based off of, look it up. There were several instances of that priest visiting that family and that boy that it's based off of. you know, The Right actually is a really, if you ever look for a movie that's a really good, that really talks about this a lot, The Right with Anthony Hopkins does a really good job talking about this concept of that it takes a very long time. He's actually visiting somebody that he's visited for a very, very, very long time. It's the only movie that I've ever seen them address that accurately. So
speaking of exorcism movies, I really like the movie The Last Exorcism.
Yeah. And it's just, and so to me, whenever I see some of these one and dones, I'm always like, again, go look at our video over LaToya Almonds. It's another example of it. I'm hard pressed to believe that if they just stop and you just think, oh, it's over, because I don't know, Don Decker's life just kind of points that maybe there's other problems.
I think that I'm going to have to, even though I'm somewhat on the fence, I'm going to slide into the possession camp for one detail. The odorous scent, like that stench of death that starts manifesting towards the end of the story, is very indicative of possession cases. And it's not really something you see present, to the best of my knowledge, in cases of like latent psychic ability. So I think the clues line up in the direction of this guy was likely possessed by something, maybe not a demon, I don't know, but it seems like a possession case to me. I think all the clues point more strongly that way.
Now you know why I wanted to do this particular case for this particular month. I thought this would be an interesting.
It's a really cool case,
yeah.
Although a little bit of a stretch on the theme, but I'm really glad you did it anyways. It is
counts.
A cool case.
But I'd love to know what we'd love to know what some of your guys' thoughts are on the Don Decker case. Do you guys think this was do you think this was just evidence of just of ice damming? Do you think that it was a real possession case? Like, comment some of your thoughts on this below.
Also, please stick around for the patron segment, guys, because I've been dredging up some really strange stuff. We're going to be talking about the marine demonic kingdom and underwater Nephilim and maybe some other stuff. It might get a little bit spicy, so stick around for this.
Stick around for the patron part. Again, leave us a review. Tell us what you guys thought of the podcast. It's one of the best ways to help out the podcast. Don't forget to like. If you're listening on YouTube, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you can get updated whenever we put up new episodes. But until next time, guys, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening.
All right, guys, we're going to slide into the Pillow Talk segment of this podcast. If you want to check out the rest of this awesome podcast, all you go is go over to our Patreon, sign up for as little as $1 a month to get the rest of this awesome podcast, as well as bonus episodes that we put up exclusively for our patrons. If you sign up for $2 more of a month, you actually get access to our poll to vote on the theme for next month. Currently winning right now is still nuclear paranormal phenomenon. So go over and let your voices be heard on our poll.
Okay. Now, I've got some questions for you at the beginning. Have you ever heard of marine demons?
Well, you brought up a little bit about water demons in the first part of the episode from South America and...
But in a more traditional Christian concept, because this is a idea that comes, like this marine kingdom thing we're talking about, it comes specifically out of Christianity.
Well, to be fair, in Christianity, everything's a demon. I mean water demon, air demon.
But okay. I knew that you were talking about a possession case, and I wanted to find something complimentary and on theme. So I just started using broad terms and searching to see what I would find. And I found like one random person talking about like underwater demons, and like I thought I'd found a worm. And then I started pulling it, and then I thought maybe I found a whole can of worms. And then I found a bathtub of worms. This is a huge concept. There's not a lot of people talking about it, but the people who are talking about it seem to be very in-depth about it. I found two people that are fairly famous. Daniel Duval has talked on it, as well as Jennifer LeClaire. Duval is basically a internet minister, from what I can tell, talking about a lot of like very fringe ideas, a lot of the war with demons and things like that. Jennifer is more of kind of a modern prophetess.